This is episode number 63.
Exactly. And to be honest, in conference, one part is presentation or whatever, but the most important part is discussion afterwards with the people being around there, to connect with people you simply didn't know before. And this, I think this cannot be replaced by online meetings.
Yeah, but I think it will.
As soon as you have a project, as soon as you have some sort of agenda, it's fine to go online. You do not need to travel through wherever to go. But at the very beginning, to get into contacts, it can't be replaced, from my opinion.
Part 4 of the year in review recording. 1 hour of breathtaking conversations with speakers from previous podcast episodes and business partners of the hosts. What was hot in 2021 and what do our speakers expect for 2022? As a start into 2022, I will bring the recording live in 7 separate episodes. Here is the 4th part with conversations with Peter Llewellyn-Davies from Biotech Austria and Albert Missbichler, an Austrian business angel. And of course, Astrid Wollard and Matthias Tarasiewicz. We were talking about biotech in Austria, culture of success, business angels, investments, and the market perspective, and customer needs and entrepreneurship. I hope you enjoy the conversation the same way as I did. Enjoy the show. It's Peter Llewellyn-Davies, and he is president of Biotech Austria. And I'm curious to hear how the year was for his organization and himself. Welcome to the show, Peter. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Christian, also for the intro. Yes, it's been a very upheaving year. It's very unusual to be in a position where you've had all the ups and downs that normally you wouldn't expect. But biotech is indeed a thrilling business. And as you probably heard from Johannes and his colleagues and everybody else, it's probably at the moment one of the most exciting topics to be talking about. So thank you very much for the invitation.
It's good to have you here. It was amazing to hear from Johannes and Philip how great the life science industry evolved in Vienna over the last 2 decades. I mean, when I think back myself, when I started in the industry in 2006, let's put it bluntly and exaggerate a little bit, a handful of companies existed here. And I learned from Johannes that we had an exponential growth since then. How do you see 2021 for life science entrepreneurs?
Well, when I came to Austria in 2017, it was quite interesting, really. I had only really heard of Austrian biotech in respect of Intercell, Valneva now, and a few others. And I didn't really see it as a Viennese type of entity. It was an Austrian-wide, and I've been to a biotech event in Innsbruck. And what amazed me at the time when I came was the strength of the science, i.e. the institutes and the universities and the students, the amount of students actually coming out of university and looking for challenges. And then I realized that a lot of them went abroad. And I thought to myself, why are they going abroad? I mean, there's so much in this country. It's not just the nicest place to live, but, you have a strong infrastructure. You've got the scenery, you've got the schnitzels, and you've got everything wonderful here and the wine. And then I realized, oh dear, what's not going right here? Because it could be a really strong country for biotech. So things have improved since then. We've had 5 exits this year alone. Oregon, Fargomed, Allsites, just to name, and Temus, just to name 4 of them. But it's been an amazing year, and it's going to continue this way. I believe it.
Yeah, I'm just smiling because the term exit in my opinion, it didn't exist 20 years ago. So there was not much going on. And when I open now in the internet, it feels like on a daily basis, we get some success stories here from Austria. Peter, you started Biotech Austria almost a year ago. So it's also an anniversary for Biotech Austria, if I remember it right. How was the first year for your team?
Well, thank you very much. Because when Johannes and myself and a few of the biotech entrepreneurs sat down in 2020, we said, is this an idea we should follow? Should we set up an industry association just for biotech? Because these industry associations exist in the US, in the UK, in France, in Germany, and in Switzerland, a very, very successful biotech industry. And we said, let's do it. Yeah, let's get this industry associated started. So 30 of us started last year, and now we're 60 a year later. So if we double every year, well, I think there are only about 200 companies in Austria at the moment. But so the goal is to increase the amount of companies as well. An amazing year, quite simply because our goal is to not just support our members, but also to make people more aware of biotech in general. And I'm not just talking about the red biotech industry, the white one as well, but just in general, to understand that this is probably at the moment the most needed industry, not just because of the climate control, but also because of health. Look at the coronavirus. Biotech was the reason why we are suddenly are able at this moment in time, at least, well, it's changing sadly, but to get it under control at least a little bit.
Now, it's amazing to hear also, I learned with Johannes and Philip that on the infrastructure side, a lot is going on. How do you see the situation for infrastructure here in Austria for life science entrepreneurs?
So that is really one big issue we have here. So one of our first goals is with Lisa Vienna, with ABA, with all sorts of others, the AWS and all sorts of others working together and farming to get entrepreneurs out from universities and start businesses. We want to create the spirit that you have in Cambridge in the UK and Oxford and in the US. And, there's a lot of money in Austria. Let's just think of all the rich families, but also there's tons of money available to make biotech a success here as well. So we need to get the entrepreneurs away from their labs and into a company. And we start that perhaps with a simplified founding of a company. It's called the Austrian Limited was one idea, but it's just a simplified company. That's one of the big hurdles we're facing at the moment. But secondly, we just haven't got enough lab space. And this is really something we have to work on. So anyone who's building, anybody who's in the field of building properties and investing in that, they should think about lab space, because that is big business of the future. And we haven't got enough, just not enough.
What in your opinion is the bottleneck? Why is that way?
Well, people invest in flats and shopping centres. Mm-hmm. But the longer the pandemic goes, I think they're beginning to realise that shopping centres aren't really the ideal thing to invest in. Sorry, but instead, I think
Jeff Bezos would agree to that.
But it would be a good idea to invest also, and no one has really realised that labs are needed, and perhaps this is the moment now to say, okay, let's not just talk about shopping, because this is going more and more online. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the entrepreneurs of the next generation. And this is science. Science is strong in Austria, and we need to promote this and get it invested.
I completely agree to that. I mean, when I think back 20 years ago, we didn't have much companies. I understood the point that there's nothing going on. But as you and Johannes and Philip from Lisa Vienna mentioned, we have had exponential growth, and probably it's continuing. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs, and probably also the probability of return is much better than investing in shopping centers for real estate investors. And maybe this podcast also helps to raise awareness. I think infrastructure is one important part. And in the podcast episode we did together, you mentioned we need a culture of success here in Austria and in Europe. Can we emphasize that a little bit more? I think we can't talk too little about this important topic.
Oh, absolutely. My background is British, although I'm at heart an Austrian. Well, I am now. So, unless when it comes down to football, perhaps not so much. But anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway, so I personally feel that the spirit of entrepreneurism is there. And we're also in a situation right now that we need a rethink in the way we look at entrepreneurism. And just to give you an example, if you come out of school and you think, okay, what am I going to do now? Well, I'll go to university. What am I going to do now? I'll get a good job. Okay, so we need to think differently and say, okay, why don't I just found a company? And people are scared about failing. They're scared about failing because failure is, there's a word for it, obviously in German, which means it's negative. Failing is negative. We need to change the mentality and say, no, failing is a part of the learning curve. And if we instill this attitude into the younger generation, those who want to found a company, and say, look, it's no problem, just move on. The next step, let's do it. And that will also create not only a great country, but a great culture for success.
That's true. Astrid, you were smiling. Do you want to add something?
No, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm half British, actually, yeah. And studied in Oxford. And I need to say, it's been very different to be sort of immersed in the sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem over there, where everyone just feels like, oh, what could be the next idea that I'm doing? It's sort of like hundreds of student societies, entrepreneurship at every corner, basically. And it's the opposite. If you don't have your sort of burning idea that you want to develop, you're more likely to be a failure than anything else. So it's very much the opposite from here. And but I feel it's something that we really need to also again, start somewhere in kindergarten, in schools, to really teach, like maybe not try to nurture this curiosity that with what, children are actually born with, to naturally play around and think like, oh, how could I do this and that? To really keep that going and not stay too much on this sort of like, oh, forget your fantasy, that will not get you anywhere, but really also bring this to schools. Also, I mean, it's also in Austria, if you look at the kind of career events that you have, like the BEST is doing a great job, in helping people to get together with universities and finding, ways in how they could educate. But I have never seen actually a stand that it would speak about entrepreneurship and say like, okay, here's actually a very different career path. You could actually build your own company, develop your own ideas or anything like that. So there's also something that we really need to develop more over here.
Yeah, and one thing to add on to that, I mean, I don't know if any of you read the Depresser this week and saw that English knowledge and proficiency in Europe or in the world. And guess where Austria is? I didn't think about it at the time. I thought, okay, somewhere in the middle, I don't know. It's number 2 behind Holland. I was most surprised about that. Germany's somewhere around 12, France is 27, and you think, Austria, wow. And this is one of the reasons why this country is going to be really, really successful. We just need to believe in ourselves and make sure our kids get the right education to actually use this. And the first step is taken, language proficiency, especially the center of Central Europe, right? And you need to be able to speak English here because of all the cultures coming together here, not just talking about Vienna.
I completely agree. I mean, this was a huge debate around the podcast. People often ask me, why English? Why not German? You are in Austria. And my answer is always, I mean, if I want to address the world, I need to learn and practice English constantly. It's 1.5 billion people on the internet, in the world speak English, and they're all on the internet these days. When I limit myself to German, I have a market of roughly 120 million in the world. So any company that wants to go out on the global market needs at least English and ideally also other languages. I completely agree with that, Peter. Peter, when we talk about the future, let's switch from 2021 to 2022. What's on the future agenda of Biotech Austria? What are the 3 most important parts that you want to change?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about the answer yet. So you're going to have to test my spontaneity. So, okay, well, number 1 is to make the awareness of biotechnology a big. We're making this a big thing, and I think number 2 is to get together with all the excellent institutes and universities, but also the associations and clusters. Make sure we all work together to create an environment for the next step. And number 3, and perhaps this is also number 1, is to make the Austrian government aware that innovation isn't getting big pharmaceutical companies to buy and make enormous sites for manufacturing drugs, but to think of the next generation and invest in the next generation. And as I said a few minutes ago, and this is one of our goals, we're going to try and lobby and support the industry in that respect and make sure people understand, particularly politicians, that if we don't do that, people will leave Austria, get their education here for free, not like in the UK or the US, for free, and then they'll leave and go somewhere where they can make some money. They'll go to the US or the UK. They won't stay here. If we're lucky, they'll come back, like Christoph Huber, who left Austria to found Biotech in 2018, and he went to Tübingen because they offered him some money there. And the German system is a lot better than it is here, and he lives in Austria again because he is Austrian. But I think there are other examples as well. We just need to make sure people come back or stay here. They can get their experience elsewhere. So just those 3 points, I think, are the main awareness ones we're talking about this year, for next year.
I agree to that. I mean, when I look back to 2006, there was practically no investment money for biotech and for life science. After the initial seed stage, and the usual way was leaving Austria, going to Germany, the United Kingdom, and then tapping into the US market. And I think there is still a lot of room for improvement for policymakers to make Austria more attractive for capital investments, especially in life science and in biotech. I still think we don't have enough capital in that area. How do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So now you're talking about points 4, 5, and 6.
So it's a long list.
Yeah, it is a long list, to be honest. But so within that, as you quite rightly say, we need to get people, because they are made aware of biotech, they begin to believe that it's a good idea to invest in biotech. So obviously getting investors from the US and other countries as well to invest in Austria is great. But why don't we get the guys who invest in IT and in shopping centers to invest in biotech? There are billions in Austria, Austrian entrepreneurs, the big families. I don't need to name them here, but the big families here. If we manage to set up a system that these families say, okay, I'm going to invest in Austrian biotech as well. I'm going to put some money in there. And we're not talking about billions. We're just talking about hundreds of millions, which isn't a lot for them. Because half a dividend of the Austrian Telecom is 100 million. Even that would help our industry. So this is something we're working on as well. Goal number 4, absolutely right. Investors in biotech.
Yeah, and especially in the early stages, you can do really a lot with 100 million or 200 million. And 5 years ago, I heard the example from the Ministry of Finance that foundations have a lot of capital. And if they would be motivated and if they were possible to invest only 1%, you have this 100 to 200 million that becomes available very quickly, very easily. And this can do a lot in the translational research area, for example.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about number 5, is... if you look at a development of a drug, I'm just talking about the red biotech field, which is development of drugs. This takes usually 10 to 15 years. Believe me, BioNTech didn't get their vaccine because they were so brilliant. In fact, they just invented it in January 2020. No, they developed this for cancer, right? And it had been in development for 10 years already. So they were ready to go, and they just switched the indication. So the clinical trials themselves, they cost tens of millions of euros. And now let's look at Apiron, or Invirus as we're called in future. If we want to set up a clinical trial, we won't get any money from any Austrian government. We have to go out and get the investors, because the FFG, there's no criticism, they're great. The FFG only has funding for startups and preclinical investments. Once you get into clinical trials, which you need to do to prove that the drug works, you need the money and you don't get it here. So what you do, you go abroad. Is that the right idea?
Yeah, it was a pity that the CLIFA program was stopped a couple of years ago. I mean, this was targeted from the FFG on clinical trials, and for some reason it didn't move forward. Since we were talking about point 5 already, I can't make up the point 6. What is the point 6 on your list?
Have fun.
Have fun. This is always a great thing. Peter, this is also the right spirit to move into the next year. I think have fun, do what you love, be passionate. I remember your words from our podcast episodes. And this is sound advice. Peter, I wish you and your teams all the best for the future and a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. And everybody here, thank you very much for these absolutely interesting insights. Matthias, thank you for sharing these articles. Really appreciate it. Guys, this is a great country. Let's make this successful. Thank you very much.
Let's do so. Have a great time. Astrid, Matthias, what topic do you want to talk about next?
I feel there have been so many topics that we have already spoken to about today. It's sort of like fascinating, how we always go between, sectors and investment. But I think the overarching theme today was really sort of education. Again, health literacy, financial literacy, then I don't know, like online ready literacy or something like that, and really wonder, how we can actually sort of take this as a sort of spark to really foster change here.
That's one aspect that I like a lot, Christian, from your description is this idea of having an open mindset, or like I believe you call it the beginner's mind, which is I think important also to let new things into your system and to be able to learn and to understand that there is enough to learn and there is a lot of things to improve too. So I guess this is what I find very interesting, what you were publishing, Christian, because also I see like from the debate that you have going on with the people you invited, this is like interesting because I think a lot of people understand and can learn from that, can learn from experience, can improve. So I guess it was also the brief topic we tackled just now. Also this understanding that there is, or like getting rid of this anxiety of failure, which is in a way also stifling the innovation, possibly through a cultural kind of out of a cultural necessity in Austria. So I guess this is looking at different studies in this regard, very different in the American startup culture, where it's clear that you can fail and it's like not such a disaster if you do. So I guess this also shows a bit of business resilience in this regard, which Austrian startups and entrepreneurs would need. And I guess this also boils down then in the end to available capital, to investment opportunities and so on. Because in my opinion, still we see also a lot of hesitance, or like not so, like capital is not that readily available in Vienna yet, sadly. Even compared to Berlin or like to other startup cities or to other startup contexts, we see that this risk is really also clear to the investors, and this traditional idea of, okay, I'm investing in a high risk situation. I guess we could need much more of those people that understand that it can be fun to deploy risk capital. So I hope also that this is also driving a bit of investment thoughts in the future, because especially in research, I see a lot of and in IT, this is at least the field that I'm observing closely. There's a huge gap in what people understand as research. So usually in very business-centric context, research is usually seen as solving some instant need. And I guess this is like not how we should see research. I see research much more as a kind of a way of how to de-risk the future and how to actually prepare also in terms of this kind of different literacy that is needed these days. So if it's like making sure that the team gets stronger, or you're prepared for very uncertain markets such as the cryptocurrency market, or technological risk as if should the Web 2 ever break down, or all these type of things. So I guess a proper research strategy and a proper understanding of how to build up this literacy would help us. And this is of course starting with sentences and approaches like that to have this open mindset and beginner mindset, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think totally. I mean, also the future is sort of interdisciplinary in that respect, because there is not just one sort of field that can live on its own. I think the IST Austria in Klosterneuburg is doing that actually quite successfully, where it really brings together researchers from several fields, and none of them can really or like to be pinpointed to one specific area, so to say, because they say like, no, they identify actually with computer sciences and with biology and whatever. And I think that's also the way to go. And this is something that we also need to push in our minds more, to think less about, a particular sector, but really think about more the transferable skills that we can actually use in many different sectors and how this could be also applied. Or for example, how we could also use, gladly, also in biotech, there is more and more data science approaches that really help to sort of de-risk certain developments. And I'm looking forward to, these data models being also stronger in a way that we also can de-risk clinical studies earlier, so that we don't have this high failure rate, which I think is probably one of the reasons why maybe there is some hesitation to put even more money into this field. But I don't know, up for a suggestion. But yeah.
So, as you mentioned, Matthias, beginner's mind, this is, I think, is a term from Zen Buddhism that I learned my martial arts career. And it's basically staying open-minded. And this is the spirit I want to see in the podcast, that we talk with a lot of successful entrepreneurs and decipher what makes them successful and make these know-how accessible to anybody, and point at the success factors, like how did some entrepreneurs become successful? What were the steps that they were doing? And one important part is, as you mentioned, Matthias, today we have a lot of big problems, and these are not small problems anymore. And the right way to work on solution for these problems, like the pandemic SARS-CoV-2, is to train scientists to come up with solutions. And this is also where beginner's mind comes from, and martial arts. In martial arts, we always said, when you wait until you're attacked physically somewhere in the street, it's too late. If you want to self-protect and you want to learn self-defense, you have to train before something like that happens. And I see it similarly in tackling the big problems. Like also Peter said with Biotech, Biotech basically trained their team for more than 10 years to learn and understand what their technology can do and how they can use it. And after this training period, it's quite easy then to switch to a different indication, or also have a look when more problems evolve in the world. Can we use our technology for that? But I think the crucial part is we need to start training early. And sometimes when I look at the conversations I have here in Austria or in Europe, I still get a little bit the feeling that it's more reactive. So when something happens, then we can do something. But very often it's too late. So we need to start earlier. And hopefully with the podcast, we can contribute a little bit to these, to solving these problems or these challenges, and help people understand how success looks like also in life science, also in the digital space, what the success factors are, and how people can model that.
Very nice. So how do we model those?
We will see. We will see. I think we are getting there. When I compare the spirit in the United States, it seems to me always it's quite normal to start businesses and don't worry too much, move forward, work on a solution 1% at a time. And think in Europe a little bit, it's getting better. It's getting better. It's improving. Astrid, how did you see the spirit in Oxford? You spent some years there. How is the UK
10.
Spirit? 10.
10 years.
Okay.
No, it's just very different. I don't know, and but I tried to figure out several times why it is, and maybe it is also that you have just this very nice college system where you're actually thrown together with people from very different fields and sectors. So you're not just limited to one study sector. Again, in Austria, it is if you study, biology, then you go to your biology student organization. Okay, sometimes there are some events, but there is no really close interaction with sort of people from other sectors as well. And so just by being thrown into this college system of having so many other really clever people around you from different fields, you get challenged also on a very different level, because they ask questions that you might never had thought of your own kind of field, because you're already sort of like quite blindsided about it. And I think that helps also to sort of develop yourself and challenge your own views of the world. Because I need to say, honestly, when I was in Austria still, I was always thinking, okay, I'll do my master's and then I'll, have a job and it's fine. And sort of this experience in Oxford really turned me completely around into a person who found out that I'm actually much more an entrepreneurial person. I'm much happier in this space. But it really took sort of the ecosystem there and being exposed to many different ideas and opportunities to really sort of break up this cage I was in, really, from having grown up in this system, right, basically.
I think it was funny when I compare the attitudes that I got exposed to in the 90s. It basically was finish school. If you want, you can study something at the university, but you don't need to. It's mostly not necessary. And then after school or after graduating from university, find a job in a big corporation. And then 2 reasons I remember for founding a company. One was before you retire. So eventually, after 40 years of your career, when you retire from your last job, then you can start a little consultancy, make some money for retirement. Or those people who were not able to find a proper job in a corporation. I think this is, in my mind, the attitude of the 90s. And when I look now at the world, I mean, what happened since 2008-9 here in Austria after the big crisis at the startup scene that were mostly built, Speed Invest, for example, great success. Austrian startup, we have later Markus Raunig here. When I look at the funds that evolved, your fund, Astrid, also ISD Austria, that was started, I think, also 2006 ago. Then ISD Cube, their fund. Then we have many funds in the digital space, and I always envied a little bit the dynamic that I saw in the digital space and missed it in the life science industry. But I think this is changing now. This is changing now since the start of the pandemic, and also as Johannes Sachs, Philipp Heinzel, Peter Llewellyn-Davies said, they see a very positive dynamic in the future. And I'm curious to hear also on that topic our next speaker, which is a business angel here in Austria. It's Albert Missbichler. I pull it into the panelists and welcome to the show, Albert. Let's give us your insights into entrepreneurship. Albert.
Hello.
Good to hear you. How are you doing?
Thanks, fine. Okay. Sorry, let me get the picture.
It's good to hear and see you.
Yes. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Albert, we were talking about entrepreneurship in Austria. I think you are a long-term entrepreneur and business angel here. Give us your perspective on entrepreneurship.
Well, it's a really interesting business. And I'm in since about 6 years. And I changed a little bit my point of view, because at the beginning I had some good suggestions for investments. With rather big tickets, which obviously turned out to be not the best way to take at the beginning big tickets, because if the development does not succeed like the business plan said, you've got a problem with liquidity. So I changed to small tickets now, and I'm just now busy with 3 or 4 different very young startups involving as well young as also already little bit older people, which have the big advantage that they have already some experience. Then what I saw, that if you have a very young person, spin off from the university, very engaged, perfect, but they need some sort of backup with all these things you have done during setting up a company, all these do's and don'ts, which you don't find in any book. You don't learn it at the university. You come from scientific part, which is perfect. You have a perfect, say, process development. You have the idea of a perfect product. But there is another important point, which often is neglected. There's the point of market. So is there my market? How can I get to that market? We had this with the important point is, that the approach to the market and the feeling of in which time you can access the market often is missing with young people. And this is where I'm now busy in trying to involve myself with my experience and with some advices to get there. On the other hand, the small company has the big advantage that it can be flexible. As an example, I invested in Fianostics, which was founded 6 years ago and was focused on rather small molecules, development of detection or diagnostic of small molecules in the R&D section. And 2 years ago, everything which was not related somehow to Corona, R&D, it simply was turned off. So you have a business model with companies, with laboratories, with partners all over the world, and within 2 weeks, they all disappear. Simply they disappear because nobody got money for research. Expect you're busy in something correlated to Corona. And so we took the chance to switch over, and within half a year we developed a test on our platform, and we are now going to market this test. And again, big surprise, two seniors in this company having about 30 years experience in clinical diagnostic. We know all the people, we know the market, and we said, okay, the test is ready, it is approved, every laboratory things are done. There shouldn't be any problem to get this test into the market. It is a problem. So we just face 3 months of being active, getting results. Yes, very interesting. Oh, yes, could you give me a sample? Would you buy it? Just not now. And this is the thing that we have to just to face and keep in mind. You need a long odom to keep this distance, or to stay within this distance without getting bankrupt in the meantime.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, one thing is producing a working prototype, yes, and the next thing is then to either sell the story to investors for the next step to make the working prototype fitting any kind of market, or if the prototype already addresses a need, then to find the customers. And this is tough work. It's proper planning. And
yes. I think this is very much underestimated, that maybe it is at least 50% of the whole story has to be get the product on the market. Success.
I mean, I completely agree. My opinion is also backward thinking. So start from the customer need and then think about what problem you solve. And very often when I talk with companies or with people that are early to entrepreneurship, I get the impression that market comes last in the thinking, and also financing comes last. So when they run out of money, then they start thinking about, okay, is there a customer or is there an investor? And very often it comes too late. So my recommendation always is the minute you start putting together a team, you need this business skill and financing skill on the team as a core process that develops alongside the other operations in the company. How do you see that as a business angel?
Yes, this is a very important thing. And also I see this as the main activity of the business angel, besides investing some money, just dragging along the people to the lead. Anyone who will pay is not the investor, is not the bank, is not any fund. It's a customer that will pay the whole company. And if the company should be a success story, you need a lot of customers or a big customer that really pays for the product. And therefore, it's very important to get the need. Which problem can we solve for the customer? Do we have to make the awareness in the customer with his problem, or is the problem already there? most of the things you have to make the awareness to the customer. You got a problem, you simply don't know, but I have the solution. Mm-hmm. As soon as one of the customers believes the story, you're on the good side. If you can't get the customer to believe the story that they have a problem that you can solve with your product, whatever it is, they never will buy it. And I think this is, in many cases, this is the problem for many startups, that they have a very good idea, a perfect product, but the market is simply too small, or they can't address it properly. Mm-hmm. So even if they get a lot of money, it takes them not only 2 years, maybe 5 years, but in the end, they have to fail because the market is simply not there. And if you can raise some money from whomever, and you have sometime you have to pay this money back.
That's true.
Therefore, it doesn't make sense to raise 15 million of whatever money for a market which is about 10 millions in total. You won't get into the market to that.
And you can't.
It's very interesting to see business plans prepared for investors, prepared for funding companies or FFG or whatever, where you have this total market and you get less than 10% from Austria, Vienna with 5 people. This simply doesn't work. Mm. When I remember when I started my startup nearly 20 years ago, we had a very good business plan, histamine intolerance. This is involved about 5% of the world. And you can calculate every person takes 1 pill per day, which costs €1, makes whoops, turnaround with whoops. This doesn't work. I remember, just an example, you have to check the market, whether you can have the idea, this is from the Austrian market, whether you can transfer this to international market or even to Germany. So what I learned very quickly, if you come from Austria, Germany ends around Frankfurt. Everything north about, they don't need German or Austrian inventions or Austrian people. You need a confident person there who can make the marketing there for you, because you must not go from Vienna to say, Hamburg. Mm-hmm. They simply don't talk to you.
I think there is one important point that you emphasized, or that we should emphasize more, because I miss it very often in companies. Jeff Bezos, in his book Invent and Wonder, wrote as a headline to one article, "What's good for the customer is good for the shareholders." So the only goal a company has is to serve the needs of a specific type of customer. So customers that have a problem, which the company addresses with a product or a service that solves the problem. And a company doesn't serve public funds or doesn't serve investors, they serve the customer. And sometimes when I look now on the market, sometimes it looks like to me we are too much on the investment side, so that companies or entrepreneurs think in terms of exits and selling their companies. And Christoph Länger, for example, in one podcast said, a company is not sold by the entrepreneurs or by the founders, it's purchased by a company. So it's a switch in the mindset. How do you see this mindset that you perceive on the European market? What are we dealing with currently?
Yes, it is an interesting problem you're addressing now. The mindset of many founders is really, we sell the company, or we build something, we have to build something up. We file lots of patents, which are more or less expensive, which are more or less useful in the idea I can sell this whole package to another company, to an investor, whatever. Not keeping in mind that this investor doesn't buy the company, but a product which should work on the market, or at least a very good idea which the investor or the strategic investor can use in his setting. And also the next part is looking for a strategic investor, not for a VC. In most cases, you have not the experience, you don't have the resources to address the market properly when you start a company with, say, 5 or 6 persons. This simply is impossible. So you need some connection network which goes together with you to address the markets in different fields of the market, in different companies or in different countries. You can't do this by yourself. And this is also very important to bring this into the mind of the startups, that they need partners and they need reliable partners. And of course, most of these partners want some money for their activity. And it is always important to divert the money into product development, whatever this is in total, and market development. This must go in parallel. If you forget about the market development, you've got a product with no market for that, and then you run really into problems. And also to have the feedback at the market as soon as you have some sort of working type of prototype. You have to check it with the market. Is this really this what my customer needs? Or is this what our development process developed because it was the most easiest way to get somewhere in this direction we want to go?
It's good that you take it.
The need of the customers changes.
Mm.
So we had development, for example, antibodies to SARS-CoV-19. Very important. Politicians said 3 months ago, this is no valid system for getting somewhere. So we can forget about that within a few days. So you have to do this market surveillance, this permanent market surveillance, and see where does the market change? Are there different requirements for the market? Are there different requirements from regulatory parts? Another very important thing, regulatory can kill a project rather quickly if you overlook some details.
This is important what you say. I mean, we were talking about content marketing, and today on TikTok, for example, I saw a short clip which was quite interesting, and the question was, how can I make my business successful? Should I draw up a nice balance sheet or write extensive business plans or something like that? And the answer was no. The first thing you need to do is finding your customers that pay you even when you just have a prototype. This is the most important step. Unless you don't have at least one customer that buys into your solution, you always have to question the market. Albert, in that spirit, when we look at 2022, what is your outlook to 2022 in terms of entrepreneurship?
Well, I hope that we will have more possibilities to get into personal contacts again, because just what you just said, you can't sell a product online without having personal contact to your customer. You don't get the proper or necessary feedback from your customer, from your potential customer, without sitting with him in a room and having him in front of you, talking with him. You can't do this online. You can work out protocols if you know each other. It is, to my experience now, it is nearly impossible to get an honest feeling of that what your customer or your potential customer really needs. He won't tell you this in written words, but you can see in your reaction, okay, yes, this is the feeling, or there might be a problem, you can talk with it. So I think it's very important to find personal contacts again with universities, with young research groups, also to find out if there are any useful ideas that can be transferred into market. So this is what I'm looking for, really, and hopefully we can at least in spring start again, going out, talking to people, collecting ideas, bringing ideas together to make this virtual network also working in a real network of connecting people on a table, in a whatever.
Albert, I'm curious now to hear Astrid's opinion on that. I mean, my opinion is also that we need this personal contact to understand what customers need. It's for me, it's also different sitting face to face in real life in front of a person and getting the full experience of communication compared to the digital version. I mean, digital has become much better in the last 2 years, but still I believe we need the real world. When I talk to younger people, they often say, no, we don't need it. Astrid, How is it in the digital space? How important is the direct contact to customers in your world?
Not really much. I mean, in general, I agree that we all need, face-to-face contact, and sort of value our relationships there, with friends and occasional business partners. But I think most people have seen that also in the digital space, you can become more efficient and you think more about, do you really need to travel to this meeting? Or can I actually do it online? Is it really necessary for a 1 hour meeting to actually block out 3 hours, just to get an initial assessment? I think we have been actually quite successful in speaking to teams fully online. This has also not been the case in the VC space before. Before you would always also get the whole team on site and sort of meet everyone or also go there to the office and stuff. I think there are now ways that you can also, it takes some training. I will say that. Yes, it takes some training and also for your gut feeling to develop and how you can actually measure and interpret digital interactions. It's much harder if you don't have a video like we have now, for example, on Zoom. That already gives you much more information. But I think you can do most things actually online. I think you can also sell to your customers online, and this is also why we have now also such a push with this whole metaverse system, where we will see that a lot of things will actually move into the digital space that don't necessarily need to be in a person-to-person contact.
And maybe this was a very important thing you said. You need training on the online communication. And I also think it's a question of age. We have been educated as an older person. We have been educated and we have lived our active lives in direct communication. If you grow up as a digital native, it's simply, I think it's very much easier for them to get into this sort of communication type. Of course, we have
I'm
to...
not sure. So I tell you one thing, when I had my first job while I was actually still writing up my PhD thesis, so I already took a full-time job at the Science and Technology Facilities Council in the UK. I had actually my manager, who was already in his 50s, up in the north of England, and I was actually sitting down in south, and I had actually no team around me. And what we were doing was also communicating always just digitally. And it was really weird for me because it was the first time that I actually hadn't met someone in person, or didn't have contact with my manager in person. But sort of after a year or so, you get used to this. And so like, okay, no, yes, you can actually talk like you would in any kind of way. So I think it really it's less an age issue than really something like training, being open to it quite regularly. I mean, I have now basically Zoom calls every day, starting from 8:30 to, some time in the evening. And so for me, it's become quite, not normal, but I got very much used to it. Yeah.
I agree to that, what you both say. I think it depends, in my opinion. Yeah. Sascha Berger pointed it out with the importance of building trust, and where he said, in his opinion, it's important to meet at least once in real life. And I would agree to that. But building on that, what Stephanie said, the content marketing, I believe when a company and especially the founders do their content marketing online really well, putting constantly content out there that describes who they are, what they are doing, and seeing a track record after 5 years of a consistent content marketing strategy can help to build the trust. But companies that don't do that online, where you basically, still when startups approach me, when I look the people up, they are not existing on LinkedIn sometimes, they don't have a Twitter profile, a Facebook profile, maximum a company website that says we are coming soon. So it stays a black box. And when I compare it to, for example, Gary Vaynerchuk, he's one of those who says a company has to put out 64 pieces of content every day. And not only the company, but also the executives, founders, and owners. And his opinion is when you do that really constantly, you don't need the real world anymore because everything is laid out and building trust comes naturally. How do you see that, Albert? Is that something that you could also live with, that you see a track record of content of a company to replace the personal contact?
I think it's very helpful, and it is very important, as you pointed out sometimes today. As soon as there's a new name on the screen, you look it up in Google, you look it up in LinkedIn. The same thing. That's what I also do. The problem is when you've found a company, you don't have a track record because you're new. So you may have a track record as a person, but if you are a spin-off from a university, so you may have some papers which are limited to those people who can read these papers scientifically. Everything else is simply not there. And therefore, it is, especially at the beginning, I think it's important to have this personal contact. As soon as you're somehow present already, you have to build up this, you have to make these feeds. This is okay. And you can continue your connections with every people, with customers already if you're here. As soon as you're present and as soon as you have settled up your homepage or whatever you put in there, this will work, I'm sure. But at the very beginning, I think it's necessary to meet people in person and to discuss also this to make this brainstorming sessions online. They work. I've done some of them, but they work much better if you are meeting in person with 5 or 6 people. This is my experience. I mean, this is very subjective, this meaning. Maybe it can work much better, and I'm simply not used to that. And I'm not really wanting to get used to that, really.
Yeah, I think there's a question also from a comment from Kimberly coming in that she finds a very interesting discussion. And she would be interested in knowing if you found ways of connecting with new people and ideas online less effectively as we do at coffee breaks, at in-person events. I mean, this is something that I experienced in my behavior with this new normal that we have now. Before 2020, my normal behavior was that when somebody wrote me an email, I wanted to meet for lunch or for coffee or somewhere. But as Astrid said, I mean, it takes 3 hours going for lunch in Vienna. It's 1 or 2 hours lunch, and then you have to commute between that. And since Zoom is working so well now, even when I'm in the same city with the person who invites me, now my first reaction is, okay, let's have a 30-minute Zoom call to see if we really can do something instead of let's meet for lunch. Astrid and Albert, how do you see it in your life? And Matthias?
Well,
I mean,
just do it.
You could. No, I mean, for us, it worked quite well actually over LinkedIn, for example. As you said, you can reach out to people via their profiles or even sort of on Twitter, then set up sort of an initial call of 30 minutes, to keep it short, and then say like, okay, is there any, angle that you could work on, and then sort of keep the interaction going from there. So through several either messaging apps or also email. I mean, email seems to also be dying down these days, I have the feeling, but it's still there. Just it is certainly, I don't say, more intense because you have to sort of check in at least once a month or so, like any updates or, keep up with regular calls. But that has actually worked quite well for us.
Well, I agree. You can continue or you can discuss a lot of things with people you are intending to meet. You make an appointment with one person or with another person. You can go to lunch or you can set up a Zoom meeting. This is fine. But if you take the coffee break after some conference or whatever, you meet people you would not address via a Zoom meeting because they're simply there because they're taking their coffee 1 meter beside you. And you listen what they are talking about, and all this information simply you are missing. Because you don't address these people because you don't even know them, but you get to know them and interesting, what are you doing? Maybe we can connect, or maybe you're a sympathetic person, or maybe you have an interesting project, but I won't work with you because I don't like you. All these things are very different to pick up in Zoom meetings.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think at conferences, this element of chance or luck or however you call it, pumping into people that otherwise I would have never met is an important factor in business. So a lot of contacts come out, and they also can't replicate it here. So when they have an audience, I don't even know if Zoom still restricts people from communicating with each other. But when I see 60, 70 people in the audience, I hardly believe that there is any communication dynamic behind the scene like we see on a conference.
Exactly. And to be honest, in conference, one part is the presentation or whatever, but the most important part is the discussion afterwards with the people being around there to connect with people you simply did not know in before. And this, I think this cannot be replaced by online meetings.
Yeah, but I think it will.
As soon as you have a project, as soon as you have some sort of agenda, it's fine to go online. You do not need to travel through wherever to go. But at the very beginning, to get into contacts, it can't be replaced, from my opinion.
I agree to that. I think we need a balance between online and offline worlds, but I also think that the online world will be part of business as it is right now and will become more important. But we still need at least some big conferences where people can meet and also have this initial accidental contacts to move forward that are very important.
Yeah.
Albert, thank you very much for joining the session. It's always good to see you, and hopefully we can meet up for a real life lunch or dinner pretty soon.
Hope so, yes. I wish everybody good holidays, a very good switch in the next year, and hopefully much health.
Same to you, Albert. Same to you. Have a good 2022. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.